Council, I want to welcome everybody to our meeting tonight and begin by thanking all of our media partners for reporting on our meeting and broadcasting it. I had a couple city councilors who wanted to say a few words, so we will start with Councilor Rick Miro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder to everyone here, everyone watching, this Friday, the Queen Street Cruise is back again for the third time. We hope everyone gets their spot on Queen Street and waits for the parade of cars that are lining up at all the dealership sponsors in the city up on Great Northern Road, and they'll be making their way down to Queen Street just shortly after 6 o'clock. So the weather's supposed to be great. It's scheduled for this Friday night and Saturday morning to, let's say, 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon. We hope we'll see you all there. All the proceeds are for Arch, and it's the third annual Queen Street Cruise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. So Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I just want to take a quick moment to say that over the last few days, over the weekend, Sault Ste. Marie hosted the Heritage Conference for Ontario. And I want to say thank you to everyone involved for organizing such a successful conference. This included many, many volunteers from the community and also city staff. One of the main leaders from the city staff was Virginia McLeod. So I want to say thank you to her and her team. Without their wonderful project management skills, creativity, I don't think our conference would have been so fun and successful. Also to the Heritage Committee. As you know, our committees are comprised of many volunteers, and with their efforts, time, doing posters, to transportation, to figuring out the seminars, it all went extremely well. And the last but definitely not least is our other volunteers and helpers, such as the Old Stone House, Kathy Fisher. She was remarkable, and also Barb Nolan from our Aboriginal community. And I know, and I apologize if I missed a few others, but Parks Canada, Jeanette and her team as well, with Whitefish Island and Parks Canada. So once again, thank you for your leadership skills, and thank you for your support and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you can start the meeting, please.
Under Agenda Item 1, I have a motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland, resolved that minutes of regular council meeting of May 28, 2018 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councillor Turkle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.7, Municipal Law Enforcement Officer and related bylaw. 5.5, Vehicle for Hire. 6.17, Vehicle for Hire, spouse employed by police services.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.14, status update on the disposition of 22 McDonald Avenue. Purchaser is a client of the law firm at which I work. 6.15, Fox Run Developments, sale of 1 foot easement. Client is, or one of the parties, client of the law firm at which I work. And bylaw 11.1.7, the numbered company removal of the holding provision. Again, the applicant's client of the law firm at which I work.
Okay. Do you have all those noted, Madam Clerk? Okay.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hollingsworth, go ahead.
Thank you. Item 6.15, Fox Run Developments. It's a business relationship with our company.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none.
Under Agenda Item 4, motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Christian, resolved that the agenda for June 11, 2018 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under Agenda Item 5.1, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, Evelyn Theriault with the Seniors' Rights Protection Council of Sault Ste. Marie and area is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Theriault.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Seniors' Rights Protection Council, we come before you asking that you proclaim June 15th Elder Abuse Awareness Day. In 2012, the United Nations General Assembly designated June 15th as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, or WEAD Day, as an official United Nations International Day set aside to acknowledge the significance of elder abuse as a public health and a human rights issue. Elder abuse is defined by the World Health Organization as a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there's an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to an older person. It's a violation of human rights and includes physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, financial, material abuse, as well as abandonment and neglect. It's estimated that 10% of older adults will experience one or more forms of abuse at some point during their senior years. This represents up to 370,000 older adults in Canada, and of that total, 160,000 live here in Ontario. It is the one day in the year when the whole world voices its opposition to the abuse and suffering inflicted on some of our older generations. It also provides organizations an opportunity to promote resources and services available throughout their communities that may help increase senior safety and well-being. Through our outreach, we encourage communities promoting seniors' rights and ensure that seniors are treated with dignity and respect in order that they can age in place and continue to serve their communities as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important active members of society. The Seniors' Rights Protection Council of Sault Ste. Marie and area recognizes the importance of taking action to create social change and help educate older adults to be aware of the different forms of abuse and neglect that may occur in their lives or within their environment, and be familiar and know how to report the abuse. On Friday, June 15th, our council will be joining communities across Canada and around the world to raise awareness of World Elder Abuse as we host our 10th annual Seniors in the Know seminar. This free seminar will be held at the Seniors Drop-In Center on Bay Street, where informative presentations will be provided by a variety of speakers to educate and help engage community members how we can promote dignity and unite to stop abuse and restore respect. For more information, or if you'd like to register and attend the seminar, please call 705-942-2195. And on behalf of the Seniors' Rights Protection Council, we'd like to thank you, Mayor Provenzano and Council, for allowing us time on your agenda to make our presentation and for proclaiming June 15th World Elder Abuse Day.
Thank you. I have a proclamation, and then I see some hands went up, so we'll get to some questions afterwards.
Thank you.
Whereas older Ontarians deserve to be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important and active members of this province. And whereas World Elder Abuse Day is recognized annually around the world to raise visibility of elder abuse by sharing information about abuse and neglect and promoting resources and services that will increase senior safety and well-being. WEAAD, WEAD, is an official United Nations International Day acknowledging the significance of elder abuse as a public health and human rights issue. Whereas World Elder Abuse takes many different forms: emotional, physical, financial, neglect, abandonment, and sexual, it is estimated that 10% of older adults will be subject to abuse at some point during their senior years. And whereas the Senior Rights Protection Council of Sault Ste. Marie and area recognize the importance of taking action to create social change, to prevent, educate, and raise awareness of abuse and the neglect of older adults. And whereas on Friday, June 15th, the Senior Rights Protection Council will join communities around the world to raise awareness as we host World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Our 10th annual Seniors in the Know seminar will be held at the Seniors Drop-In Center on Bay Street. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim June 15, 2017 as World Elder Abuse Day in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and encourage all of our residents to recognize and celebrate seniors and their ongoing contributions to the success and vitality of our province and our community. Thank you, Evelyn. So I think we had some questions. Councillor Myers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evelyn, this comment's for you. I just wanted to, this is my last time that I'll be here when you're here, as you come every year. And I just wanted to thank you for all that you do on behalf of the seniors in our community. You do a lot, and I've watched you over all these years, and I've learned a lot from the initiatives that you've led. So thank you so very much. You do a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. Is this a proclamation?
Well, there are, make sure you take the right one. So they're all up there. Yours should have been on the top, but I don't know.
I'll take one.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Under agenda item 5.2, World Refugee Day, Sean Holliday with the local immigration partnership is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. I'd just like to read out a little brief thing. Actually, it's for both the proclamations, if that's okay with you.
That's fine, yeah, absolutely.
So Sault Ste. Marie has historically been a gathering place, and therefore our community is comprised of people from many diverse backgrounds. It is this strength and diversity that makes Sault Ste. Marie a city where all citizens can reach their full potential. Although residents of Sault Ste. Marie may not share the same cultural backgrounds, it's the many things that we do share that make this community a family. The appreciation of nature, a passion for the arts and culture, as well as empathy, compassion, and respect for all other members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have two proclamations here. So we'll start with the first on World Refugee Day. Whereas the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is mandated by the United Nations General Assembly to lead and coordinate international action to protect refugees and find solutions to refugee problems worldwide. And whereas it is important to recognize that Canada has a long history of helping and protecting refugees and is signatory to the 1951 United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees and its 1967 protocol. And whereas the United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted on December 4, 2000, a resolution naming June 20th of every year as World Refugee Day to build awareness, empathy, support, and respect of refugees. And World Refugee Day provides us with the opportunity to increase awareness and understanding of the intricate process of integration for refugee men, women, and children, and recognize their courage, strength, and determination in starting a new life in a foreign country with dignity. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie and its people continue to welcome refugees and make resources available to them for their families so they can have a dignified life in a safe and free environment. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim June 20th, 2018 as World Refugee Day in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So we have another. Do we have comments on that, Councillor Butland?
To Sean. We've had a very successful accommodation of refugees in the community. It's quiet and successful. Do you have a number? I think someone suggested to me there are over 100 newcomers in Sault Ste. Marie as a result of
well over that.
Some of the activities.
Roughly 150 individuals that have come to Sault Ste. Marie so far, and there will be more. But currently we have that's through the government refugee program. There's a few more that have come through private church sponsorship groups as well.
Very good. Primarily from Syria, or are they a mix?
Primarily from Syria, almost all. I mean, there's some like from the Congo, somebody from Palestine, but pretty much mostly Syrian.
Good job. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So this proclamation is for Canadian Multiculturalism Day. Whereas on November 13th, 2002, the Government of Canada, by royal proclamation, designated June 27th of each year as Canadian Multiculturalism Day. Whereas Canadian Multiculturalism Day is an opportunity to celebrate our diversity and our commitment to democracy, equality, and mutual respect, and to appreciate the contributions of the various multicultural groups and communities in Canadian society. Whereas the concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect, and recognizes that each individual is unique. This includes race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical ability, religious belief, political belief, and other ideology. A community that values diversity moves beyond simple tolerance to embracing and celebrating the uniqueness of all individuals. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim June 27th, 2018 as Canadian Multiculturalism Day, and invite all members of the community to take part in Canadian Multiculturalism Day to acknowledge, celebrate, and embrace our diverse and cultural past, present, and future. Thank you for your work, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor.
Madam Clerk, I think we should move to 5.5, Mr. Dawson, view for higher new rates. Mr. Dawson has a brief presentation he wants to make to council, and then we'll do the PUC rate application after he's finished. Welcome to council, Mr. Dawson.
Thank you. Thank you, council, for giving me this time and this platform. It has been, for those of you who don't know me, it has been said, and I've been accused of being anti the taxi industry. I want to assure you that nothing could be further from the truth. What I am is I am pro taxi drivers being paid the minimum wage as laid out in the Employment Standards Act. 12 years ago, I took on this fight, and I made it my business to find out as much as I could about why taxi drivers were not being paid the minimum wage. I found out that drivers were often being paid less than half of the minimum wage, and the documentation of that was clear and unequivocal. There was a report out in Toronto where taxi drivers, on average, were making way below the minimum wage, and this report was done by two university professors, one from the University of Toronto and one from Ryerson. This was unacceptable to me, that people who were working in this industry should be paid far less than the minimum wage. Having said that, I've made contacts throughout the province. I have contacts in Hamilton, I have contacts in Toronto, and I have contacts in Thunder Bay, Sudbury, North Bay, you name it. I've talked to and talked on an ongoing basis with drivers and with their union organizers. I can say happily that in Sault Ste. Marie, the majority of taxi drivers today are being paid the minimum wage. And I take my hat off, if I had one, to the owners of the taxi industries here in the Soo for recognizing their legal responsibilities. Having said that, there were at least 60 cases locally that went through either the Ministry of Labour, Revenue Canada, and the court, the provincial courts. None of those cases ruled that the drivers were self-employed contractors. The fable of drivers being self-employed contractors has been refuted irreparably. Taxi drivers are covered by the Employment Standards Act, and they should be treated as such.
Mr. Dawson, I appreciate your point, but we're speaking specifically to a different matter, which is the taxi company's request for a rate increase.
Right.
So,
and what I'm saying is that taxi drivers in other communities, Sault Ste. Marie has led the way. taxi drivers in other communities are not being paid the minimum wage. Therefore, comparing our rates to the rates in Toronto, the rates in Hamilton, or Sudbury, or Thunder Bay, or North Bay isn't doing the job. What we need is financial data to back up the claim that they need a raise. Whether we've got that in what Chief Ketch has done, I don't know. But I would suggest that it is the responsibility of council to ensure that that has happened. I would also like to broach the subject that maybe it's time this council stepped back from regulating the taxi industry and had a discussion about doing just that. Maybe we should let market forces control the rates that taxis charge. If you set a rate that is too low, you're going to have poor service, you're going to have dirty cabs, you're going to have long waits for cabs. If you set a rate that's too high, you're going to have voters saying, hold on, everybody, we're getting gouged. You have a job like King Solomon had, only you don't have a sword that you can cut the baby in half. You need to reach a balanced decision as to what the rates for taxis should be. And it should take into consideration all of their costs, including the fact that they are paying the minimum wage.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. So we're not going to pull that matter up on consent. We'll get to that matter when we get to the consent agenda.
Your Worship, may I address that matter? I'd like to make my point about it. I'm Michael Adams. I wrote all of you this morning.
Okay, so generally, sir, you can come to the mic, but generally we don't take delegations from the audience. You have to request the opportunity to delegate, but you have communicated with council on this matter, so if you can keep your comments to a couple minutes, we'd appreciate it.
I'll be very, very brief.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Adams.
I just want to point out before I even start that there seems to be a misapprehension. This request by the police commission and in effect by the taxi brokers is not to raise the maximum fare. Our council in this bylaw sets a minimum fare. That's what you're going to raise if you voted in favor of this tonight. Quite frankly, I don't think this council should be in the business of regulating any industry. With that, I agree with Mr. Dawson. Get out of regulating taxi cabs. You're not very good at it. But quite frankly, I don't think we should be setting a minimum fare. Any broker who wants to raise his fares can. He just has to give a 30 days notice to the police commission and post his fares in the cab. They can do that. They already have fares far higher than the minimum fares right now. All they're asking for, quite frankly, is your blessing so that when fares go up, they blame you. So you're politicians, you know what that sounds like when you get that. The second reason they want to do it is most of their income comes from contract work, hospitals, post office, school boards, etc., where during the day, all of their fleet is dedicated to doing that business. By you raising the minimum rate, minimum fare, what you're doing is giving them bargaining position when they go to bargain with those entities. Quite frankly, I think you should be out of the business. If you are going to pass this as Chief Keach suggests, I suggest you pass it exactly the way he has written it, that these will be the maximum fares. That I would love. I will consent to that happening. Or not consent, I'm not in a position to consent to anything. But that's really what you should be doing. But I know that the legal department is doing some work to look at the whole taxi bylaw. But passing this, don't think you're capping fares. You're not. You're putting a floor under them. And already fares are substantially higher than that. There's no necessity for them to do it. There's no pressing need. You're supposed to be regulating in the public interest. This is not in the public interest. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments, Mr. Adams. Okay, council, we'll get to that matter when we get to it in consent. We're going to move on to the PUC rate application presentation, and we have Mr. Bonifero here. He's the chair of the PUC Group of Board Companies, and we have Rob Brewer, the chief executive officer of the companies. Mr. Bonifero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We're back. I'll be brief tonight. We're here to President Brewer will explain and go through the cost of service rate application, but I thought I'd take this opportunity tonight to recognize the passing of our chair of PUC distribution. So Ella Jean Richter was passionate for PUC and the PUC companies, and not only that, to this community in its entirety. Her commitment and her actions certainly had made this community a better place to be, and we will surely miss her at the PUC, and we will miss her in the community. So to her family, to her daughters and her granddaughters, our condolences, and to this community, we lost a champion. So I just recognize that, and I'll pass that over to Rob Brewer to introduce the team from PUC here and to go through the cost of service rate application. So thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonifero. Mr. Brewer, welcome to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present today. As you can imagine, my first 5 months at PUC have been busy. For example, for the past few months, we've had some challenging operating conditions this winter, with the cold temperatures to start and the frequent snowfalls even into April. This resulted in some significant water main breaks, and the crews that fix those breaks do so in the middle of the night and in some of the most challenging conditions. We've also established initiatives in support of our strategic plan, a plan that continues us on the path of a more customer-centric, business-focused, and innovative utility that we all can support. We've also successfully filled the VP Finance position following the announcement of Terry Greco's retirement after 28 years of service. We're very fortunate to have landed on an outstanding candidate in Kelly McClellan. Both of them are here tonight, as is Claudio Stefano and Kevin Bell. We've held the first of many town halls where we intend to give our customers and suppliers an opportunity to let us know how we can serve them better. And finally, central to the reason I'm here today, we're in the midst of the cost of service application for PUC distribution. The cost of service application is a data-driven process that takes almost a year to produce. We complete this application every 5 years to set our base rates. Years 2 to 5 of the process have inflationary factors applied, as you can see in the chart. We have had very conservative increases, despite the fact that we have aging infrastructure and an area with limited growth. On May 14th, approximately 4 weeks ago, we started the process of communicating with our customers about the next steps in the cost of service application process. A copy of the notice announcing our application was posted on our website, was posted in the Sault Star, was on our Twitter account, and we issued a press release updating the community on the process and inviting them to an OEB community meeting concerning the application. The OEB community meeting is on June 19th at the Royal Canadian Legion from 6:30 to 8:30. There will be brief presentations from the OEB, from PUC, and from any other approved intervener from the OEB. There will also be a question and answer session. As part of the cost of service application, the Ontario Energy Board requires us to communicate with customers via newspaper ads, website postings, radio ads, which you'll start to hear next week, and finally with the community meeting. During this engagement, the OEB specifies the format that we can communicate and specifically requires us to communicate only one portion of the bill impact and to base the changes on a typical Ontario customer that uses 750 kilowatt hours per month. However, a typical PUC customer uses 910 kilowatts and enjoys the benefit of embedded generation in the form of solar farms. As a result, a typical PUC customer, as a result of the cost of service application, will see increases of approximately 62 cents a month. I'll explain this further in a moment. There are a number of components that go into an electrical bill. The highlighted components on the screen are the ones that the cost of service application specifically addresses. These are the distribution and the deferral variance accounts. The distribution portion represents approximately 25% of the bill, and that's the amount that the local distribution company, in this case PUC, needs to operate and maintain the system effectively. The deferral variance account represents the various credits which in the case of Sault Ste. Marie represents a substantial portion, and that's due to the solar farms. So in Sault Ste. Marie, the embedded solar generation results in customers receiving a credit for the transmission and the wholesale market changes. Because the solar is embedded within our distribution network, there's no charge required to get it to Sault Ste. Marie. And so customers benefit from the fact that there's no transmission charges required. So the result is the total bill impact, which the chart illustrates. And as you can see, the average PUC customer sees 62 cents per month. But it's worth noting that 1/3 of PUC customers will see no increase at all. To put all this in perspective, PUC customers enjoy some of the lowest hydro prices in the province of Ontario. And as you can see, in 2016, we were the 3rd lowest. In 2017, we were the 4th. Based on the cost of service application and based on other utilities' expected increases for 2018, we anticipate being in the same relative position for the next 5 years. And for the sake of comparison, let's see how Sault Ste. Marie compares to northern neighbors. So you can see where Sudbury is, you can see where North Bay is, you can see where Thunder Bay is, and you can see where Algoma Power is. All have higher rates than we do at PUC, even with the proposed rate increases. So we encourage interested members of the public to attend the community meeting on June 19th at the Legion, and I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ruhr. Thank you for being here. The rates that you just showed us, would it be fair to assume that the other communities are also going to be looking at rate increases?
They will. So all of them are at various stages of that 5-year cycle. But yeah, well, the comparison that we did in that chart was actually with their 2017 rate. So when you consider the fact that there will be a rate increase in 2018, comparing it against our 2018, it will be even more favorable for Sault Ste.
Okay, so to the point, do you feel that within this next 5-year window then, should we proceed as is possibly being recommended, that we would still be in that, enjoying that position among our northern peers and even Ontario? I mean,
we will.
Certainly it's 3rd or 4th lowest.
Yep. After the cost of service application, the next 5 years or next 4 years in the cycle will be at less than CPI. So we will remain very favorable for the next 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Councillor Butland.
Yes. Not often I've suffered slings and arrows with regards to the solar power, solar farms in Sault Ste. Marie over the last several years, so it's really refreshing to hear there is a benefit of solar power to Sault Ste. Marie. So very specifically, it's in the distribution, it results in the savings?
So the solar farms are connected already to the distribution network, whereas the other power sources that we get, the energy sources we get, are transmitted through the transmission network to our distribution network. And so there's a transmission charge as a result of that. In the case of the solar, it's connected directly to the distribution network and there's no transmission charge.
How does the energy storage facility or facilities maybe, how does that benefit the customer in Sault Ste. Marie?
How would an energy storage facility? Okay, well, an energy storage facility would allow time of use arbitrage to benefit commercial customers.
So no one's quite going to understand what you're saying there. So at large, so if you could just, as best you can, like simply explain what time of use arbitrage is. I mean, I know because of all the time we spend together at the PUC board meetings talking about these type of things, but it's not like a concept that's generally discussed in the community.
Fair enough, my apologies. Throughout the night, when a battery storage facility would potentially charge, it's doing so at that current rate in the middle of the night, which is very low. And in fact, sometimes they're offloading the power by paying people to take it. So in effect, it's gassing up or energying up at very low rates, and then it's putting it back into the system at peak times of the day when it's much higher. So what it allows us to do is to share that savings between those two to cover both the cost of potentially of a facility, if we went down that road, and the customer would benefit as well. So
even I understood that one.
He did a fantastic job of explaining it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's more of a statement. I was told in the past as well, it's a long, onerous task to make application for rate increases. Can you put a time frame on how long it takes to arrive at this final number?
Yeah, it's been almost a year. I would estimate that when you consider staff time and consultants' time, it's probably close to $1 million just to put that application together by the time we ride it all the way through.
There must be a better way. Is anyone looking at that?
Well, if it was within our control, I'm sure it would be a better way. But unfortunately, it's us meeting a regulatory requirement from the OEB. And it's a 1,500-page plus document that had to get submitted, that has to be data-driven, that's based on a whole lot of number crunching from Terry Greco and his crew. So it's been a busy year for them.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Anything else, Council? So before we let you go, I think it was important that the PUC came here today, because you might get calls from people in the community. As it's been explained to us, they have to advertise this in a very rigid way with specific information. That doesn't tell the whole story, and it's not an accurate reflection of what's going to happen to people's bills. So I want to recognize the executive at the PUC, and I want to recognize the leadership of Jim and the board for working hard to try and keep the distribution rates down. Terry, thank you for your years of service to the PUC. We certainly wish you well in your retirement. And it's important as residents call us about this when they see it advertised that they have the right information. So I encourage all of City Council to have them get in touch with the PUC, and the PUC customer service will explain things so that they understand what's going to happen on their bill. So thank you very much and good work on that. And I'm confident that we have some positive years ahead of us here. So thank you
very much. Take care.
So, Madam Clerk, I think before we get into consent, we do have another delegation here that's not shown as a delegation. So if we look at 6.11, Council, request to rename a portion of Ontario Avenue, if I can just pull that off, because we have some fine gentlemen here from the 49th. I'm not sure, Lieutenant Colonel Knox, if you wanted to say a few words or if you're just here to answer questions, but I think they're here to see that 6.11 is passed. So, Council, if we can take a look at 6.11, Madam Clerk, if I can just have you read off the resolution, and if there are no questions, we can deal with that one now, and we won't have to take any more of our esteemed friends' time here.
The motion by Councillors Myers and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of the Director of Engineering dated June 11, 2018 be received, and that the section of Ontario Avenue between Pine Street and Upton Road be renamed Garrison Way. Further, that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Okay. Councillor Myers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, what a handsome-looking group, right? Look at these guys. Rob, you like standing out. I know. I can tell that. Yeah. But, I just really want to thank Lance for approaching several weeks ago about this. It's a fantastic idea. Councillor Hollingsworth is born and raised on Upton Road. I'm born on Upton, moved to Findlay when I was 2, so raised on Findlay. So the Armory has just been right in the heart of our upbringing. So we're acutely aware of the Armory and the work that goes on in there and the incredible impact that you have, not just on our community, but our province and our country, and all the fine fellows with you. So I don't know, Lance, if you want to say a couple of words about it. I think we're going to try to plan a ceremony for later on in the fall. You may just want to speak about that. Thank you.
Your Worship, Councillors, thanks for hosting us tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time to consider the proposal that I pitched to you. I purposely chose Garrison Way as the name for the street because the term garrison reflects the people inside a military establishment. So in our case, in our armory, we have 3 cadet corps, we have the Newman Navy League, and we have 2 primary reserve units, the 33 Service Battalion and the 49th Field Regiment. So you have a broad spectrum of ages and experiences working on that building, and it is a community building. Council has been incredibly supportive of the uniform throughout my time in uniform, and I know that would continue regardless of what you vote on tonight. But having an opportunity to name a street that abuts a building that's been in place since the 50s, I think reinforces that commitment that the city has to its military establishment. And reassures us that what we do back for the community is appreciated. I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Let me reassure you that it certainly is appreciated, all of you. Councillor Hollingsworth?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to echo Councillor Meyer's thoughts. I want to say thank you to all you wonderful individuals for serving Canada. The men and women that serve day to day touch our lives in so many ways that sometimes we don't see it. But I just want to recognize yourself and the others in our community and across Canada. There's many times where we have relatives or husbands or wives that are deployed and they miss lifetime moments. And so I just want to emphasize that the sacrifice they make for us, we appreciate it, I appreciate it. So this small change in the street is really actually quite large and huge. So thank you for all you do.
Anything else, Council? All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And by the
you.
way, Your Worship, the 11th of September will be a garrison parade on our paved parking lot on the north side of the building, and we would love to have you as the reviewing officer for it.
I accept.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Thank you, Council.
So, Council, we are now on the consent agenda. Any matters on consent? Councillor Christian.
I just want to draw everybody's attention to 6.1, Relay for Life. If council will provide me a little bit of flexibility, just want to make a comment rather than offer any questions. For those of you out there watching, this Thursday, June 12th, Corps is holding its 7th annual Relay for Life at its athletic field. And you may not know this, but Corps is one of the few high schools in the province, and I believe the only high school in Northern Ontario that runs its own Relay for Life separately for the Canadian Cancer Society. This year, there's going to be over 200 participants and 50 student and faculty volunteers, and they're hoping to raise about $25,000, which would bring their 7-year total to over $100,000, which is pretty impressive. And they haven't just done that. Staff have been involved and students have been involved in other fundraising events, including the Great Lakes Honda Bake Sale and Car Wash. Do want to give a special thank you to the Mayor's Youth Council, who gave a generous grant to help support some of these fundraising activities. So I just want to wish and congratulate Mr. Martell and faculty and staff at Cora for supporting such a worthwhile cause.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in 6.1? Councillor Christian, do you have any other matters on consent?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.2, the audited financial statements, if I could direct some of these questions to her.
Sure, you can direct it at the CEO and he will direct it where he sees fit.
Michelle, just bringing it up. I'm sorry. 6.2 to Michelle, the deferred revenue of $1.3 million in federal gas tax. Is that just an accounting, a timing issue, like we're just waiting for the check, or what's the explanation for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the federal gas tax from 2017, it's money that we received but did not get spent in 2017, and that was mostly due to the cancellation of the Sackville Road. So that got reapplied for 2018 capital budget and has been utilized then.
Okay. We're anticipating, I think, approximately $1 million less in interest and investment income, 2017 versus budget. Can you explain the reasons for that?
Are you asking for budget or compared to 2016?
Comparative.
Against a budget?
Yeah.
In the budget, there's several items that go into investment income. Part of it is casino revenue. The other is interest and penalties on taxes, and as well the investment income for the PUC, and also our bank interest that we earn. Several of those items are over and under compared to budget. Most in particular was the interest and penalties on taxes, and that's mostly from interest on one large property. The dividends for the PUC were actually under budget, and the reason for that is that the dividend wasn't declared until 2018, so there was a timing difference. And if you recall, when we presented the December 31st, 2017 quarterly financials, we indicated that we had made an adjustment utilizing our reserves to cover it for that year so that we didn't have a deficit in that area, and then it gets replenished once we get the reserve or the dividend in 2018 pertaining to 2017. As well, casino revenue was about $120,000 higher than budget.
Okay, thank you. Under the consolidated statement of financial position, page 6, net long-term liabilities, 2017, we're sitting at 6.3 million versus 7.7 from 2017, or I'm sorry, 2016. Would the debt that we're going to use to pay for the cladding on the Civic Center, would that be included in that number, and has it been added in yet, if it is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, no, the windows and cladding is just starting now, so there has not been expenditures incurred. Usually the long-term debt is monetized once the project is complete, so you probably see that 2019 more than likely that it will get added to long-term debt.
So to that point, I noticed that we see that our long-term liabilities, or at least our debt refinancing, increases to 1.6 million in 2020. Would that number be included in there? Does that explain the graduated increase over the next couple of years?
Which note are you referring to?
Where did I see that?
Note 4?
Where did I see that? I have it in my notes and I can't, hang on one sec here. I'll see if I can dig it up. I think it was a schedule of long-term debt payments.
Okay, it's note 4. Under note
yes.
4, you'll see principal repayments recoverable over the next 5 years. That relates to, you'll see it increase, because obviously as debt is decreasing, the interest becomes lower, the principal becomes higher.
Right.
In 2021, you'll see a significant decrease because the NOHFC loan for the John Rhodes Community Center will be done. In 2021, the arena loan will be done, and in 2022, the NOHFC loan for the WEC will be completed. So that's why you see the significant drop in all of the long-term principal payments.
Yeah, and really, just a comment, I mean, that really bodes well for the city's finances, and I think that's come through time and time again in the reports that we get. Financially, although, we see slight increases in taxation every year, financially, the city's being well managed, and I think this is a great testament to that. I mean, our long-term debt account is very impressive, and a lot of flexibility built in there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on that same agenda item? Seeing none, Councillor Christian.
6.9. I just have a quick question on this one.
Okay. Mr. Elliott is here.
Yeah. My question is this. I understand that Tulloch has the agreement. My question, just for clarification, was that, do we assign those type of engineering projects, do we assign them, or is there an actual a competitive bid process? I'm just trying to refresh my memory. Mr. Elliott.
Yeah, we're waiting.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, it was a competitive process. Under the new procurement bylaw, we went RFP for engineering services for that contract.
I guess, and I just want to be clear, so the actual bid for the first phase is competitive, but because they've won it, we're relying on their cost estimates for the second part. What I'm getting at, the first part is competitive, but the additional fees are non-competitive. They're simply assigning a price that they feel that they need to charge for that service.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, that's correct. But we're comfortable with it because the the field services portion of these kind of contracts are really dictated by the length of time that the contractor spends in the field. We know what the contractor, or what the engineer's rates are for their staff. So in our, I would suggest that it doesn't really matter what engineer you have for the field services. The cost is probably going to be fairly comparable.
When they, one final question on this point through you to Mr. Elliott. So having said all that, when they come forward with a price, I'm assuming, and confidently so, that we know we have a good idea by way of their communication with us exactly where the costs are borne.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, yes, it will, the length of time that the contractor is in the field, that will be the length of time that the engineering firm is in the field, making sure the work is done in accordance with the spec.
Okay.
So it's, we're confident that there's good value there.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else on that same matter on the aqueduct? Councillor Shoemaker.
Same matter.
Councillor Shoemaker, go ahead then. What do you have on consent?
I was going to pull 6.17 from consent if it hasn't already been done.
Yeah, we were going to move that off, so.
And
that.
then on consent, I did have one question.
Sure.
Actually, two questions. 6.6,
Go ahead.
municipal parking lot lighting. Is there was a line in here about energy savings of 30 to 40%, I guess through you, Mr. Bear. Do we know what that means in terms of dollars and cents, what that's actually going to save?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, the approximate spending in 2017 was about $6,200. So at 40%, you'd be looking at about $2,500 in savings.
Okay.
That's just in the one lot, correct? That's in our lot.
In the lot.
Yeah.
But the 6,800, sorry, is for all the lots.
Sorry, that's in all, that's for all the lots.
That's all the lots.
That's all the lots,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't seem like a lot of power when you consider all.
Right. So it's certainly not going to change the fact that we're actually doing this conversion isn't going to result in a net positive in terms of what it's going to cost versus what it's going to save us until, well, I suppose, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, you're correct. Really, we were looking at, we had some lights failing. There was aging infrastructure there. And so this was an opportunity to replace those lights that were failing. We will see some cost savings, but it was more the aging infrastructure that we're taking care of through this refurbishment.
And is it perhaps, if you know, more expensive to service the old infrastructure than it is just to upgrade them and save some money that way as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. Each time we were replacing a bulb in the old lights, it was about $2,000 just because of the cost of the bulbs, and then they had to rent a lift to get someone up to change the lights, and the LED lights certainly last a lot longer and will avoid a lot of maintenance costs going forward.
Okay, sounds fair.
I think the CEO is looking to add to that.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, and I guess all of council, and I turn to the city clerk for this. Looks like there's a misprint, at least in the version I have, in terms of the amount that's identified coming from the Green Reserve. It says 42,000. I believe it should read 43,320. So I just want to make sure that correction was.
That's correct. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of consent. There was an error that the dollars should be $43,320 instead of $42,000, and the resolution's been amended to say that. So your e-scribe should reflect the change.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to draw to the attention that, in fact, the Green Committee, which is chaired by my friend here, and I sit on it as I think does Councillor Shoemaker. The Green Committee did identify the parking lots to be replaced, the lights to be replaced, and this is just a continuation of that work of the Green Committee that was identified in 2015. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Shoemaker, you had something else on consent?
Yeah, my iPad just crashed, but it was with respect to 6.10. I had written it down on paper, luckily.
Upgrade to Class D gravel roads?
Yes.
Okay.
There was some suggestion in the report, and I'm sorry because I don't have it in front of me, but that we would pursue the options on assuming two roads. I think it was Pointe du Chêne Crescent and another one. Oh, thank you. So I was it said we had done this with Red Pine Drive, and I know that that took quite some time. It was just before this council, but I think it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Elliott, but was it like 10 years it took before we assumed Red Pine Drive?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, it took a while, but it wasn't fully active for that whole 10 years, I don't believe.
Okay. So I'm wondering if perhaps it would be good to get an update on how the assumption of the roads or the investigation into assuming these roads is going sometime early in the new year, so we can keep on top of the file.
I think that's a reasonable request. I'm sure staff is able to accommodate that.
Miss
It's an
Kenny?
update.
Yeah, it's Miss Kenny's work, so I guess I would ask for her view on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shoemaker, that would be happy to provide that. Just on the Red Pine, though, that really did mark an anomaly. It was a very unique file, and there were some personal issues between some of the people that were requesting the road be upgraded that we had to, and they were sensitive, so it really did add a lot of time to it, but we'd be happy to provide those kind of updates, yes?
Okay, sure. So I don't know if it needs an amending resolution or if it
I don't
could
believe
just
it
be.
does. I think it's clear to staff that you want a regular update on this matter.
Yes, perfect, thank you. And those are my only consent matters.
Okay. Anything else on consent, council? So we have 6.17 and 6.11 have been exempted from consent. So Madam Clerk, if you could read the consent resolution, please, exempting those two matters.
Motion by Councillors Grandinetti and Butland, resolved that all items listed under date June 11, 2018, Agenda Item 6, Consent Agenda, Save and Accept Agenda Items 6.11 and 6.17 be approved as recommended.
All. Oh, yeah. So we're going to take Grandinetti off and we'll put Councillor Hollingsworth? Or is there an alternate you have to use?
I don't have.
No, you can just use Hollingsworth. All in favor? Carried. So we're on to 6.17, council, because we've dealt with 6.11, vehicle for hire new rates. And we'll start with Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I understand why this request is coming from Chief Keach, because we've sort of tasked the police services with administering this bylaw. But I do feel like it's kind of lacking in some of the information that we typically get in our council reports. And it is our bylaw. So I'm wondering if it would be agreeable to this council to send this back for sort of a fuller sussing out of the, the effect of the change, specifically, I guess, comparisons with other communities, which I don't think are, fully set out in there. And then, some input perhaps from, or if there's been any, discussion from stakeholders or the public as we have received tonight. So I found the letter, frankly, to be insufficient to make a decision on.
Good, thank you. Councillor Myers.
I certainly support that, and unless I'm missing something here, the last paragraph of the letter says, I've enclosed the corresponding reports that were submitted to police services, but I didn't see them in my package unless I'm just missing them. Are there does everybody else have those and just not me? No. So in Chief Keach's letter, he refers to his enclosing corresponding reports that were submitted at the March meeting, and a letter, of course, a letter we got from Mr. Dawson, but I think we need to see more fulsome information, including those reports, perhaps.
Councillor Christian?
I just simply want to say that I agree. I think more information is needed before we could really deal with this topic.
So this matter was before the Police Service Board in February, and at that time, Councillor Bruni, I think, had the same comment that I did. I said at the Police Service Board that based on the information provided the Police Service Board, I wasn't comfortable supporting the request being made. So the Police Service Board didn't approve the request at that time. The matter went away and was returned in March. I wasn't at the Police Service Board meeting in March. I was away with my family, so I'm not sure what the discussion was at that meeting. But frankly, I feel the same way as I do in February. I think that this The delegations tonight raised a number of interesting points that I've wondered myself is around the administration of the tax industry and our role in it and our role with the police services. But also, if we're going to be talking about a fair increase, is that actually the way the bylaw is set up? Because I think Mr. Adams makes a good point that it might be set up very differently. And by my read of the bylaw, it seems that he might be correct. But in any event, I'm not comfortable, based on the information in front of me tonight, approving this request. So I would support a motion asking senior city staff, sending it to legal and asking for a more fulsome report on this. And we can put that on a future agenda, and hopefully you'll get the information you need to make an educated decision on this. Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker moves the motion, seconded by Councillor Nero. Madam Clerk, do you need more clarity on that?
It's just to postpone, not
Yeah,
a certain
well,
date?
it's not only to postpone, it's a motion to postpone, but we're asking
Pending the
staff.
information?
Yes, it's a motion to postpone the matter, but also asking staff to return a more substantial report so that council can make a proper decision on whether to support the request or not. And if everybody understands the spirit of the motion, and we'll just straighten around the wording. All in favor? Carried. So that brings us to matter 7 on our agenda, Madam Clerk, so 7.8.
7.8.1, AMO nomination, a motion by Councillors Krumpatich and Butland. Resolved that Councillor Lou Turco be nominated by the City of Sault Ste. Marie to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario Board of Directors, Large Urban Caucus, for a 2-year term, 2018 to 2020.
Any discussion on that, council? All in favor? Carried.
Agenda item 7.8.2, EDC Board member nominations. A motion by, I need somebody in place of Grandinetti, Krumpatich.
So we have Councillor Krumpatich.
Councillors Krumpatich and Butland resolved that the following persons be nominated to the Sault Ste. Marie Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors: Terry Renoni, Praman Shukla, Bill Freiberger, and the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services, with Mayor Christian Provenzano and Councillor Sandra Hollingsworth as non-voting members.
Council, any discussion on that? All in favor? Carried.
Community Theatre Centre appointments. Can I use you, Councillor Krumpatich, as word 6 in place of Councillor Grandinetti? Councillors Krumpatich and Christian resolved that Norman Farah and Bruce Butler be appointed to the Sault Ste. Marie Community Theatre Centre Board of Directors for a 2-year period, effective June 19, 2018.
Any discussion on this, council? All in favor? Carried.
Under agenda item 8.1, a motion by Councillors Myers and Hollingsworth, whereas the maintenance and security of the former hospital properties has been sorely neglected, and whereas it appears very unlikely this prime waterfront area will be further developed in the foreseeable future, and whereas the former hospital buildings are crumbling and action needs to be taken for the elimination of personal risk and to address the aesthetics of this property, and whereas this area is part of the community's prime waterfront and is situated along a main east-west corridor, creating an eyesore which impacts the reputation of the city to visitors and is discouraging to local residents. And whereas a number of serious concerns have been cited by the residents of Riverwalk condominiums who are literally living in the midst of this abandoned property site, including the following: unrestricted vehicular access, cars and trucks regularly using the area for high-speed, dangerous driving, and illegal drug activity is observed daily. People are frequently seen on the roof of the former general hospital, and risk of serious injury is a concern to those living adjacent. Health concerns are great due to an extensive rat infestation and evidence of a haven for roosting and breeding for pigeons in both the former renal site and the general hospital building. And whereas the demand on policing is substantial and associated costs are high due to the inordinate number of complaints received from concerned citizens over the past 2 years regarding these properties, because the site is an unsecured magnet permit for intruders. And whereas the state of this property does directly affect the residents of the Riverwalk condominium and those in the surrounding neighborhood, and whereas the entire city suffers as this prime waterfront area appears so poorly and could discourage investment in our community by a seeming lack of commitment to maintain high property standards. Therefore, be it resolved that appropriate staff be requested to investigate and report back to City Council by the first meeting in September on all options to exercise the full authority available to the municipality to address this serious issue, and further be it resolved that staff recommend a specific course of action that can be taken to resolve this matter.
Okay, Councillor Myers, is your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, with input from residents that live in Riverwalk, Councillor Hollingsworth and I both certainly have heard about this repeatedly. I think that all of us who live here in this community and travel that corridor are quite familiar with what this is about. And I've had certainly phone conversations and that with our chief building official, Mr. Posabon, and I just checked with our deputy CEO to see if he had any comment or questions that we could direct to him if there are any. However, really, I think the resolution kind of captures it. We need to try to find out what it is we can do. I think all of us as members of council are pretty familiar with property standards and what we normally are asking of the bylaw officer and the CBO and so on, but there's a bit of an extraordinary situation here that seems to be each year getting worse and worse with no light at the end of the tunnel here. I know that I was in touch with Mr. Sofer a few weeks back at the behest of the residents who were finding it frustrating to get some information around some plans for the building and so on, and he did comply with that. So I just feel that there needs to be some effort made on our part, Mr. Mayor, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be quite so gentle. I think this building is an abomination to our waterfront and frankly is becoming a bit of a disgrace in our city's natural beauty. So that's
not gentle at all, Councillor Shoemaker.
I do think that something needs to be done sooner rather than later. Just looking at it, you could name 10 property standards infringements that are clearly taking place. So it needs to be done soon.
So look, I support this motion. I share everyone's disappointment with what that area looks like. It's not acceptable. If the building is compliant with our property standards, there's a problem with our property standards. If the building isn't compliant with our property standards, then we should do everything within our authority as municipality to ensure compliance immediately and frankly effectively, and as best and thoroughly as we can. It looks terrible. It's a poor reflection on our community. It's unacceptable, and I agree with the councillors who have raised this motion wholeheartedly, and I hope staff understands this and takes a good look at it and does what it needs to do to address the issues in that building. They affect the whole community, but they also really affect the good people who purchase condominiums in the old site that has been redeveloped. So they're living amidst two very deteriorating sites, one on their left and one on their right. I don't think that's acceptable for them. It's not acceptable for us as a council, and frankly, I don't think it's acceptable to the community at large that those buildings look like they do. So let's do what we can to address the situation. All in favor? Carried. .2, Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 8.2, motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Butland, whereas every year the City of Sault Ste. Marie reconstructs or resurfaces many municipal roads, and whereas every year new cracks, potholes, and damage appear in municipal roads, and whereas the potholes are caused in part by water entering into small cracks left in the asphalt when it is initially laid, then freezing and expanding, which over time creates large potholes, and whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie, like many cities and provinces in Canada, has a significant infrastructure deficit when it comes to road reconstruction and resurfacing. And whereas research has shown that reducing the number of cracks in freshly laid asphalt lengthens the life of said asphalt. And whereas new technology is being studied by the Ministry of Transportation to increase the lifespan of newly laid asphalt. And whereas the Ministry of Transportation is also considering water permeability standards for newly laid asphalt to ensure water is not entering cracks and thereafter creating potholes. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to investigate the new technology being studied by the Ministry of Transportation and offer their support to the development of reasonable water permeability standards in new asphalt as a way to improve the roads for Sault Ste. Marie motorists.
Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker, your motion, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had many constituents reach out about the potholes in town. In fact, some have been lighthearted, others have not. Some have said it's like an off-road experience right in town with all the potholes that we've got on our roads. So the Ministry of Transportation is looking at this issue. They're looking at some new technology that might expand the life of asphalt once it's laid, so that they get a longer lifespan out of it, get fewer potholes in it, being developed out of Ottawa. So that's good news. I think we had a discussion here a couple weeks ago about, well, should we put another 50 grand in the resurfacing budget, or should we put it towards the splash pad, or should we put it towards the snow dump site? What really will, I think, get us better value for money is using whatever new technology is out there to extend the life of our infrastructure, since we know that these dollars are not likely to increase substantially anytime soon. So I do think that it's important we get to work to determine how we can, resolve the pothole problem. I realize we live in a winter climate. We'll probably never fully resolve it, but make it somewhat better than it currently is, which is not good at all. You'll see brand new roads paved a year or two ago already having significant potholes in them. So whatever we can do to make that better, I think we have an obligation to do. Not only is it good for the people's quality of life in town, it's also good for our budget and will help us stretch those infrastructure dollars so that we get better money for value. The last comment is that the Ministry of Transportation did look at what one extra year in their asphalt. Of course, they've got networks across the entire province. One extra year in the Ministry of Transportation's road network saves $50 million a year for the province. So I don't know what it would be for us, certainly less than that, but anything that will save us money year over year is good in my books.
Anybody else want to add to that? I think we probably all agree with you, Councillor Shoemaker. All in favor? Carried.
Agenda item 8.3, a motion by Councillors Hoopinen and Shoemaker, whereas the new Animal Care and Control Bylaw 2018-19 under section 6.1, running at large, states that no owner shall cause or permit a dog or cat to be at large in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. For the purpose of this bylaw, the dog or cat shall be deemed to be running at large if it is found in any place other than on the premises of its owner, not on a leash held by any person, not under control of any person. And whereas there have been numerous complaints in the past and recently about dogs running at large on the Hub Trail, Bellevue Park, and Hiawatha Park, to name a few, and whereas in the past any complaints regarding dogs running at large were not addressed effectively due to lack of enforcement capabilities by our bylaw enforcement officer or the local Humane Society. Now therefore be it resolved that city staff and Humane Society staff be requested to report with options to effectively enforce the running at large provisions of the Animal Care and Control Bylaw.
Okay, who wants to speak to that? Councillor Hoopinen, you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. Actually, this motion stems from an email that Councillor Myers, Hollingsworth, and Councillor Shoemaker and I received on May 3rd from a jogger who was jogging behind the old hospitals. She was jogging there, but she lives in Ward 3. She said in the morning she was running when an unleashed golden retriever attacked her. The dog was 100 meters away from his female owner. The owner did not attempt to stop the dog. The dog got excited and approached her and ran up to her and knocked her down. Luckily, she was not hurt, but she crashed onto the ground onto her hands, knees, and face. The dog incident is not the first I've encountered in town. Just the other night, an identical situation occurred on the same stretch of the hub trail, but was a different dog and owner. In that case, I didn't get pushed down. Now, I'm not going to read the whole email, but she does go on, and it's true. I mean, I think I could be safe to say that every single counselor on this in this room tonight would likely have been called at some point from some people about dogs running at large. So I know it's a difficult one to handle, but there has to be something that can be done for to enforce the bylaw that these animals must be tied when they're walking on the hub trail, Hiawatha Park, Bellevue. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm hoping that Mr. Vare and perhaps Cindy at the Humane Society might be able to contact some other municipalities and see what they do. I don't think the signage is good enough. I just think it's something that has to be addressed, and I think there could hopefully be a solution down the road at some point. I'm not sure. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good to see this here. Thank you for Councillor Hoopner and Shoemaker for bringing it forward. Councillor Sheehan and I have tackled this a few times in the past years because of Bellevue Park in particular. It's been a real issue there, particularly Topsail Island, which was deemed as an unofficial leash-free area, self-proclaimed by a number of dog owners, and it was a real issue in Bellevue Park. And I'm going to ask you, through Mr. Mayor, to our solicitor, if she might recall, because it seems to me at some point we had Norpro or one of the security companies engaged, as we do in the summertime in particular at Bellevue Park, and I believe we were able to somehow empower them to issue tickets. Does that sound familiar at all to you?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Myers, yes, they were bylaw enforcement officers for the purpose of just that dog at large bylaw, and they were able to issue tickets, and it was, and I think it continues to be a criterion in the RFP when we're looking for new security.
Good, because I think that in the warmer months, we do have a security company, I don't know who it is this year, but I think it goes to a tender and so on, and we have security on a good portion of our boardwalk areas, trail and so on. So I guess to just build on the request from the other councillors, we want to just maybe heighten the awareness of this pretty quickly with whoever is managing that contract through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Vare, to ensure that they are doing that because they have, I believe, the authority to do it. So we just want to make sure that happens now, right away. I believe they're already under contract.
Councillor Butland.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support this. It's about 1 year ago, I had a similar incident in the Ward 1 area where a woman was attacked and pushed over or whatever. Now, this business of somebody issuing tickets, like everything else, I would assume they have to be at the scene of the incident in order to pursue the tickets, which is very, very difficult. And what I want to say is, I've said it in the past, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was a regular call to a counselor. Barking dogs, dogs not properly housed, not properly fed, or on the loose. A very common complaint. I will say very honestly, if I get 1 or 2 calls per year now, that's about it. So does that mean that there is less of a problem than there was? I do not know. Is the Humane Society doing a better job than they were? I would suspect probably they are, but I don't know that either. But I will say the number of pet owners in Canada, USA, and probably in Sault Ste. Marie has risen rather dramatically. 68% of every household in the United States has a pet. In Canada, it's somewhat less, at 57%. So there are so many more pets out there that the likelihood of more incidents like this will probably be, but I would like to say the vast, vast majority of pet owners are very responsible. Because you see them. I've never seen so many out there with 1 dog, 2 dogs, in some cases 3 dogs, their little plastic bag that I would never have any interest in walking around with a dog with that, but I think the vast majority are responsible, so I don't want us to get too carried away with this, but I think asking the Humane Society, what is it that you would require? My call was, we have 2 bylaw officers and 1 driver. Does that mean that 1 bylaw officer only goes out at one at a time because there's only 1 vehicle? If that is as simple as that, it's like the bylaw officer that we're always talking about, our building a division. Well, another bylaw officer would be very helpful. Is it as simple as that? And I would hope discussions with the Humane Society staff, board, come up with not a solution, but a potential remediation of the problem. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else on the matter? All in favor? Matter carried.
Under Agenda Item 8.4, a motion by Councillors Hupinen and Shoemaker, whereas Bylaw 2018-19, a new and enhanced animal care and control bylaw, was passed on May 28, 2018, to ban domestic animals such as dogs and horses in animal exhibitions in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And whereas the Super Spectacular Circus uses dogs and horses in their performances and therefore will be banned from including Sault Ste. Marie in their traveling circuit unless they can offer an animal-free circus event. And whereas circuses have been coming to our city for many years as a form of family entertainment, and whereas it would be disappointing to many residents if the event were not replaced, and whereas animal-free circuses can offer an extravaganza with an array of acrobats, clowns, dancers, magicians, and jugglers, and whereas animal-free circuses are growing in popularity throughout the country, now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to investigate animal-free entertainment options available for the summer of 2018.
Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Hupinen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to take something away, you should replace it with something better. So here's a good example of that. I do have a friendly amendment if the seconder of this motion would approve. I think the summer of 2018 is a little bit tight. I would like to change that to within a year. I mean, these things take time. There's, maybe low seasons, high seasons. You've got to do some investigation. So I'd like to change that if that's okay.
It's your motion, and I'm sure Councillor Shoemaker is going to be agreeable to that. So we'll amend the motion to say entertainment options available within a calendar year.
That's correct.
That
would be
year,
great.
within a 12-month period of.
Yes.
Okay. So so by next year at this time, you're looking for some kind of feedback. Councillor Shoemaker, are you comfortable with that? So we're deleting summer of 2018 and we're saying within a year. Okay, do you want to add anything else?
Nope, that's all. Thank you.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Retail cannabis sites. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Motion by Councillors Myers and Hollingsworth, whereas Sault Ste. Marie has been told it will be one of the first 14 designations across Ontario to have a retail cannabis site, and whereas a yet-to-be-named location is scheduled to open this year, and whereas the province intends to open about 40 standalone marijuana retail stores, and whereas the city was required to provide the province with an inventory of potential properties zoned to accommodate the commercial outlet based on criteria provided by the province, and whereas the Ontario government, which will ultimately determine where a cannabis retail store will be located, has said that it will follow guidelines designed to protect youth by ensuring stores are not in close proximity to schools and preventing illegal storefronts. And whereas in recent months, Sault Ste. Marie City Council has been informed more than once that our community has a higher than provincial average drug problem and that our youth are already at risk. And whereas City Council has also been informed that the non-medical use of marijuana is a proven pathway to increased chemical dependency use. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council goes on record opposing the opening of a retail cannabis outlet in our community.
Councillor Myers.
Mr. Mayor, I want you to know I timed this, and it's 4 minutes, 52 seconds.
Well,
so I'm under the 5 minutes.
I want you to know that I'm timing it.
If I can speak just as quickly as I did when I was at home. I've been asked why I'm bringing this resolution forward and what I hope to accomplish. Many will say raising this issue at this time is a moot point. The matter has been settled by higher levels of government. Sault Ste. Marie will be the site of one of a planned 150 Ontario cannabis stores to be opened within the next 3 years, 40 this year and 40 next. First off, let me be clear on two matters. I recognize the federal Liberal government legislative power in creating Bill C-45, the Cannabis Act, a bill intended to change 95 years of law and legalize recreational use of cannabis nationwide. Municipalities have no authority to alter decisions made by the other two levels of government. This resolution is not about that. Secondly, I recognize medical cannabis is subject to different rules than recreational cannabis and is also regulated exclusively by the federal government. This resolution is not about that. Dear members of City Council, I ask you to recall the in-camera educational workshop provided to us in late March of this year. It was hosted by the Sault Ste. Marie Area Drug Strategy Committee. I believe it is fair to say many of us had our eyes widely opened as we learned of the disturbing extent to which drug use exists in our community. This year's headlines about opioid use set off many alarms to all Saultites and did precipitate the timing of this educational workshop. It was during that workshop that we learned much about the pathway of drug use, all drug use, not necessarily opioids. We heard from the various agencies in attendance who make up the Sault Ste. Marie Area Drug Strategy Committee. It was during that evening I learned the use of marijuana can be, and I emphasize can be, an introduction to further drug use. Since that time, I have been doing some research and reading about how the community leadership in the rest of the country and this province is responding to the coming of Bill C-45. It's all over the map. Too much information to disseminate this evening. However, I've shared some of what I found with members of council. Many communities have gone on record stating they do not want to host a cannabis store. We have never had that discussion at this table as to whether we do or do not want an Ontario cannabis store in Sault Ste. Marie. Again, I realize, and it will be noted, this council does not have the legislative authority to prevent the opening of a provincial cannabis store. However, we do have the right to make a statement as to our endorsement or opposition to such. That is what this resolution is about. I've heard from constituents in Ward 2, some in the medical profession, who indeed have asked me, where does council stand on this store coming? I've explained the limit of our power as stated above. I must say that some feel as I do. It's still important for this City Council to express our opinion on the matter. In summary, I want to cite 3 statements from a 67-page research report that I did send to Council, produced in January 2017 by the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse. The paper is called Canadian Youth Perceptions on Cannabis. It is very informative. I encourage everyone who has an interest in hearing from the youth directly to read this paper. The research was garnered through focus groups held with the youth themselves. 3 statements, Mr. Mayor, that should give all of us pause to think about our embracing of a retail cannabis store in Sault Ste. Marie. The first statement, the youth understood that cannabis can cause harm to the lungs and brain and that there was potential for cannabis to result in addiction. Next one, cannabis use was seen as a slippery slope. It is perceived as harmless and can lure individuals unknowingly towards other drugs. Focus group participants, this is the youth, also reasoned that the cannabis use shrinks the gap between refraining from drug use and hard drug use. In other words, the gap between using no drugs and using hard drugs is much smaller when cannabis acts as a stepping stone in between. Some participants felt that cannabis use opened doors to interactions with drug dealers and making drug-using friends. From there, a dealer can offer the individual new or different drugs. In other words, cannabis is a gateway drug by proxy, as it brings people into a new circle of peers who use drugs. And then lastly, the ease of availability of cannabis and lack of exposure of youth to any negative ramifications could contribute to the overall perception that use of the drug is acceptable. For instance, one participant mentioned that while growing up, she always knew the older kids were using cannabis, but never saw them get in trouble, so when it was offered to her, she assumed it's not a big deal. It was also mentioned that youth might lack knowledge of cannabis harms, so when deciding to try, their thoughts are, why not? Mr. Mayor, members of council, upon reading this and much more on the matter, as a community leader, why do I want to endorse making cannabis even more readily available and accessible through the Ontario Cannabis Store? It's the wrong message in my view. Notwithstanding, as I said at the outset, other levels of government have made these decisions unto us. This council can at the least make a statement for our community and go on record declaring we are not in agreement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Myers, thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, do you want to speak to it as a seconder?
Sure. Thank you. My thoughts. Proponents of legalizing recreational marijuana say it'll add millions to the economy by collecting regulating fees, revenue generated through tax. They've also said that it creates hundreds and thousands of jobs, free up scarce police resources, lower street crime, take business away from the drug cartels, and that our courts will be tied up less. Arresting and prosecuting these offenses is expensive for our criminal justice system. They also have mentioned that the proceeds from illegal drug trade support organized crime and greater threats to public safety, like human trafficking and hard drugs. They also have mentioned does not prevent young people from using it. I see the logic behind these points. I see why the federal government is asking that marijuana be legalized, that too many Canadians have in the past end up with a criminal record for possessing small amounts of the drug, tying up our policing, tying up our courts when valuable resources are needed for organized crime that present a greater threat to the public and our children. I understand that the proposed Canadian Act would create a strict framework for controlling the production, distribution, sale, possession across our country. I also know that Health Canada will receive the bulk of more, about $500,000 to $1 billion that the federal government has earmarked to get the marijuana industry ready. That $526 million in new funding spread over 5 years to Health Canada, RCMP, Canada Board Service Agencies, Public Safety Canada, and so forth, with additional $20 million coming from existing or internal sources, will help hopefully with our own overall safety and education. I understand that protecting our youth is a priority with our federal government and that they have been consulting with our local school boards and our Algoma Public Health. I also understand that the Act would create 2 new criminal offenses with a maximum penalties of 14 years in jail for giving, selling to youths, using a youth to commit a cannabis-related offense. I also understand it will be sold in a planned package with a yellow health warning and stop sign on it, keeping it very low-key. However, as a registered nurse who have helped those that are dependent on substances to cope through life, I do believe medical marijuana is a necessity, but recreational, I do have concerns. Not raising the concerns as a healthcare professional is, to my feeling, unethical and unprofessional. At this time, I'm using this moment to raise these issues to remind our federal representatives to listen to our concerns. I trust the federal government is working closely with our municipalities across Canada that will be impacted, such as us, to ensure that we play a leading role in ensuring our community is safe. I need to trust that our federal government and the right stakeholders, professionals are involved in looking at all impacts. If they feel organized crime will be reduced, then so be it. But at this point, as a municipality, as my council ward mate has said, we are the leaders of this community, and it is our responsibility to raise concerns, and I do have a concern for our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Councillor Shoemaker and then Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read this resolution and thought to myself, what's old is new again in Sault Ste. Marie. 99 years ago, Sault Ste. Marie voted in a provincial referendum to, quote, ban the bar and support a prohibition on the sale of liquor. In an article written about Premier William Hearst's time in office, it was noted that one of the most contentious pieces of legislation ever enacted in this province was the Ontario Temperance Act. Passed in 1916, its effect was prohibition. Today, practically everyone agrees that prohibition was a mistake, but at the time, it had general public approval. Further, it was noted that the Toronto Daily Star led the prohibition, pointing out that Lord Kitchener insisted upon temperance in the British Army and charged that there was a definite connection between the alleged German atrocities and drunkenness in the German army. And finally, Hearst came to the decision that prohibition was necessary because he had concluded that while the question was a difficult one, the evils flowing from the liquor traffic are very great, and it surely seems to me that it is our duty to make a strong effort to limit these evils as much as possible. So tonight, we're hearing about a different type of prohibition on the sale of marijuana in Sault Ste. Marie. These arguments are not medically fact-based. They're based on surveys of youth across Canada. And frankly, the current state of affairs is that someone goes to a dealer, a drug dealer, gets marijuana, they don't know what the source of the product is, and there's no safeguards, how old the buyer is, what the source of the product is, and something like 62 or 68% of people under the age of 18 have tried marijuana. So having the government run and regulate marijuana sales, in fact, protects the public. It will ensure that minors aren't getting the product, just as when you go to the LCBO, they card you. They're going to card people for buying marijuana. They're going to make sure that minors aren't getting it. They're going to ensure the safety of the product that's actually being sold to individuals by ensuring the source of the product that's being sold. So we're not in the business in Sault Ste. Marie of regulating morality. And we're not the fun police. It's not our determination whether or not we're getting one of these retail cannabis outlets. The province has said we are, and the federal government has legalized it. And so it would be akin to us saying we don't want an LCBO in our community. I think it is just far beyond the scope of anything that should be before this council, and I certainly don't support it.
Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting against the resolution. I certainly appreciate the passion with which the mover and seconder brought forward their arguments. I'm not suggesting that I agree with the federal decision to legalize marijuana, but the fact of the matter is that the federal government has legalized what was an illegal commodity and now made it a legal product. There's an entire industry blossoming before us. A recent Oracle poll suggested that almost 70% of regular Canadian users want to be able to buy that product from a safe and reliable source. The reality is that, as Councillor Shoemaker pointed out, that regardless of how we feel about cannabis legalization, the fact that some of the stuff that's being sold on the street is laced with dangerous byproducts. And some of it could be extremely dangerous, including fentanyl, which was identified in the task force report. And although I understand the concerns that are being raised by the councillors, I don't know how trying to limit or voicing our opposition to a retail outlet will address that underlying problem. As Councillor Shoemaker pointed out, it is an LCBO type of location that's being proposed. It's supposed to be for people of 19 years of age or over. I do agree with the mover and seconder and their cautionary note in that we as council need to ensure that when this does occur, that we do our part as community leaders to make sure that the best location in our community is selected, regardless of how you feel about legalization of marijuana or not. It's our responsibility to make sure that we minimize the possible adverse effects to it. The fact of the matter is, there are many things in our society that expose us to dangers, and I'm not trying to downplay the dangers of cannabis, but simply put, it's something that the federal government has decided on. We as councillors, within our responsibility, have to make sure that we're doing our best to minimize any adverse effect. Conversely, if we say no or attempt to say no to a cannabis location, we're essentially telling people that are going to use this stuff anyway to go buy a soon-to-be legal product in an illegal manner. It's like asking somebody to buy liquor from a local distributor or a still instead of going to the LCBO. So I understand the concerns. Quite frankly, most of the arguments put forth were about whether marijuana should be legalized or not, and that's not within our purview. That decision's been made. We have a responsibility as council to make sure we do the best we can for the citizens in the community. Thank you.
Any other councillors want to comment on this? Councillor Butland?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Shoemaker and Christian, and this is not an economic issue. I hope some people do mention the bonanza financially that it may bring to a lot of folks. But I'm against and studies, and there are a myriad of studies on this, on health impact or not. And you get 6 of one and 6 of another, they'll say just the opposite. Basically, the jury is still out. But generally, the agreement is that it is much less addictive than alcohol. And it's better accessed from a licensed, monitored, standardized, legal location as opposed to buying it illegally on the street, because the quality on the contents will be unknown. And as my 2 colleagues have already said, when you talk prohibition, when you tell anybody you can't and you must not do this, you know what human nature is? Well, why is that? I want to do it because they're telling me I shouldn't be doing it. And what has not been said is Sault Ste. Marie has received a lot of negative attention of the opioid crisis. And do we want to be the one in the 14 communities that have been designated at this point in time to say, no, we're saying no. This will bring, again, a tremendous amount of attention, and I think it'll be negative attention. I'll say Sault Ste. Marie's got a terrible crisis, but is this the way of handling it? Absolutely not. We have a strategy in place. The appropriate people are going to deal with it, and we can't be totally successful, but that is the way to deal with it. So this will not improve our situation in any way. It is not a strategy that I think we should be following. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can, by the way, thank you for your support on the AMO board, to which I'm going to speak on this subject here. To say I'm an expert on cannabis, it's not so. But I know a little bit about this subject because it had been one of the top files, Mr. Mayor, at AMO, which you'll probably see at the conference in August. We've been talking about this for the last 3 years, and I want everybody to know all these concerns that I hear from you, Councillor Myers, is that these have been asked countless of times through the MOU board that meets with the government on a regular basis. It's has been a very big topic. However, there's been as you can understand by the election, there has been a hiatus in the last couple of months on this particular topic. But I'm sure at the next meeting next week, it'll be high on the priority list, and I can bring some of the concerns to the board as well about Sault Ste. Marie's feelings. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, without repeating most of the things that have already been said, is that my biggest concern is that the sale of marijuana continues to be run by drug traffickers by not allowing retail sites. If it is to be legalized, then the only way to get the benefits from marijuana sales is to allow the retail sites. And when I refer to benefits, the most important benefit, I'm referring to a product that is safe for those who choose to use it within the allowable limits. So just not allowing them, even though I understand the motivation of the mover and seconder of this resolution, I just don't think that's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Fata?
I will certainly not be voting for this. One thing that I would suggest that if by some inkling of a possibility that this actually passed, and those Suites that travel to Sudbury every month to go to Costco would probably have to include one more item on their shopping list.
Councillor Hooperman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I'm not going to, there was a few things that have already been said. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is the government consulted extensively to inform of their approach to the legalization of cannabis. The government engaged with other jurisdictions that already had legalized cannabis, public health experts, law enforcement, and municipalities. 86% of the people said they support a minimum age of 19. 74% believe there should be restrictions on where cannabis can be consumed. 61% agreed that drug-impaired driving penalties should be stricter. This is all from the government website. On December 12, 2017, then Premier Kathleen Wynne announced that municipalities can begin discussions with Ontario over costs associated with legalized marijuana in light of a new tax revenue sharing agreement between the provinces and the federal government. Ottawa agreed on Monday, December the 11th, to give provinces and territories 75% share of federal excise tax revenues from the share of legalized pot. The remaining 25% to a maximum of $100 million a year will stay with the federal government. This could be a potential revenue stream, and I think it will be well regulated. I have full faith in it. I think we have to give it a chance. It's been a long time coming, and I will not support the motion, although Councillor Myers and Councillor Hollingsworth did make some good points, and there's a lot to be said on this, but that's where I stand with this. Thank you.
So I'll finish. Sorry?
I had questions as well. You had questions?
Oh, sorry.
Asked any, but I had some.
Well, you started off with your comments, so I think everybody just went to the comments. Yeah, well, I'm going to make some comments, and then if somebody wants to call the vote, the vote can be called. But so, I understand the spirit of the motion, and the spirit of the motion is we should be trying our best to protect our youth. But I don't think the motion accomplishes that goal. The reality is there's a massive black market for marijuana. It's already established. The federal government has determined, prior to the last election, they ran on this, that they were successful. They've since determined they were going to legalize marijuana. I think Councillor Christian makes the most salient point. We would be saying to the people who reside in Sault Ste. Marie, you have to go elsewhere to buy a legal product. I don't think that's a tenable position, and I don't think it's a position we can take. I would be much more comfortable seeing marijuana users get their marijuana from a reputable, safe source than from the black market. So in that respect, I don't have, I can't see supporting the motion. I wouldn't support the motion. We had Councillor Bruni call the vote. Is it a recorded vote?
Yeah, I'm asking for recorded vote.
Or recorded vote.
But I had questions of the CAO, apart from just about where we stand in terms of...
Sure, so maybe the CEO can give an update on where that process is at,
Yeah.
and then we'll have the vote.
Yeah, because there's been 4 cities announced, of which we're not one.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers and to Council. We have had discussions with the province, and that's been recorded, and I think it's also been cited in the media. They currently have 4 that have been announced. I think Toronto, Thunder Bay, and a couple others were part of the 4 that have been announced. For Sault Ste. Marie, there has not been a site selected at this time. And the expectation now, given all of the things that have been going on, is maybe it won't be until late summer that we would see a site being selected. It's understood, again, as has been said around the horseshoe, it is a federal legislation that's being administered by the province, and it's their choice to locate where they wish. They did have some criteria that they shared with us in terms of how that site location would be undertaken. We used that criteria, worked with the GIS group in SMIC, and had input from Algoma Public Health, from the District Social Services Administration Board, to then provide some properties as potential sites for them to select from. Again, with the understanding that the province at the end would be making that selection. So we're still not aware. They have not told us what the specific location would be, and we don't expect that they will be opening for a couple of months yet, whatever site they choose. But they are in contact with us on a regular basis.
Okay, recorded vote, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Turco.
Against.
Councillor Fata.
Against.
Councillor Christian.
Against.
Councillor Krampadich.
Against.
Councillor Huppinen.
Against.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Against.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Against.
Councillor Nero.
Against?
Councillor Bruni.
Against?
Councillor Myers.
4.
Councillor Butland.
Against.
Mayor Provenzano.
Against.
So the motion fails.
So we're at bylaws, Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date June 11, 2018 be approved, save and accept bylaws 2018-118, 2018-125, and 2018-126.
All in favor? Carried.
A motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland resolved that bylaw 2018-118 being a bylaw to appoint municipal law enforcement officers to enforce the bylaws on various private properties and to amend Schedule A to bylaw 9305 be passed in open council this 11th day of June 2018.
All in favor? Carried.
A motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland resolved that bylaw 2018-125 being a bylaw to declare the city-owned property legally described as Part Reserve Block 31, Plan 1M 589, being Part 2, 1R13362, being a 1-foot reserve in the Fox Run subdivision as surplus to the city's needs, and to authorize the disposition of the said property to Saldan Developments Limited or as otherwise directed, be passed in open council this 11th day of June 2018.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland resolved that bylaw 2018-126 being a bylaw to remove the holding provision from zoning bylaw 2005-150 and 2005-151 for part of the lands known municipally as 8795 and 107 Huron Street, 118800 Ontario, Inc.
All in favor? Carried. You had a question on that bylaw, Councillor? At the end. Okay.
I have a motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Butland resolved that this council proceed into closed session to receive a legal opinion concerning construction employer cost benefit report. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution under section 239(2)F, advice subject to a solicitor-client privilege.
All in favor? Carried. Before we adjourn, Councillor Hollingsworth, you had a question?
Yes, I just want to say, I believe, congratulations to our Ross Moreau.
Or MPP.
Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I've spoken to Ross. We sent out a press release and we tweeted on social media. Congratulations to him. So he's heard from me 3 different times on this. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a motion by Councillors Krumpotich and Christian that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. I've said it a lot.